All right. I think today probably today's talk, the way it'll be posted on YouTube is probably have a title something like a vocabulary of soul. A vocabulary of soul. Uh, you can't talk about anything unless you have a vocabulary for it, unless you have words that have meaning to you. And I think that's part of our modern problem is that we have no vocabulary for soul. You might think of soul as he has soul or soul music, but we sort of lost the sense of what it even means. And so today I just want to work with three words to try to understand, to get the vocabulary, and that would be spirit, soul, and practice. We're going to be, I intend to, unless something juicier comes up, I intend to spend some weeks on this sort of developing our understanding of soul. I can't remember, I haven't been going to formal church for some time. I may pop in today. We may go to the 7 o'clock mass up here, and I'll go along with Pam. But normally, I'm doing this when Pam's going to the 11 o'clock at the parish church. I may go today just to test out and see if the preacher, whoever the priest is, if he ever mentions the word soul. You know, doesn't seem to have any play into what's going on. Uh, how often do you hear a politician factor that in and even know what it is? So we're going to work on that vocabulary. The first little line from the Gospel of Matthew is provocative. He says, "This is a good question for anybody. Next Sunday we'll be working with those deep questions that you cannot Google." I'm all for Google, but there are a whole range of questions you can't Google, which means on your computer, but also the Google is up here. We just put it onto the computer, Computer, we just took everything we've got up in our brain and we put it in there. And so the one on the computer works a little faster usually than this one. But there are questions you can't Google. And next week, perhaps we'll work with that. But today, just try to get an idea of spirit, soul, and the practices that go along. If you talk about doing spiritual practice, it makes no sense if you don't understand the spirit or if you don't even believe in the spirit. So this is a line from Matthew, Jesus' words. Jesus said, "What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul?" That would be a good question. Send it to the guys on the Forbes 500. Send it to the politicians. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world? Even if you gain Ukraine, but you forfeit your soul to do it. That's a great line. Actually, Matthew's the only, that line is, they heard it, Luke heard it, but he heard it a little different. Matthew's the only one who uses the word soul. And in Greek, that would have been psyche. Well, will it profit anybody? And it's interesting they say a man, of course, but maybe women understand soul better than men. I tend to think so, based on, so did Eckhart Tolle, who we were talking about last Saturday. Women tend to understand that a little quicker than men. So that's a line of scripture. Now, and it's a good question for all of us, if we understand what soul is. So I've got I got a little short thing that some of you have heard both of these poems. The first one is just a short one that comes from Sufi literature. There's 40,000 waves going towards the Arabian Peninsula, and this little wave starts to create, and there's a much bigger wave rolling along. And the little wave turns to the big wave, and he says, "Hey," he says, I see you've been here longer than me." He says, "I got a question." "Yeah, what is it?" And he says, "I heard about this thing called the ocean. Have you ever heard of it?" "Yes, I've heard of it, but I've never actually seen one." That's the end of that. It's sort of like koans and the little Desert Fathers sayings. You ever heard about the ocean? "Yeah, I heard about it, but I haven't actually ever seen one." Well, it's sort of funny because they are, both of them, new wave, old wave, those would be in the metaphor of that we're working with vocabulary. Those would both be individual souls, and the ocean would be the one ocean would be the one spirit. There's only one spirit in the people who talk about this kind of stuff. You could call it, Eckhart Tolle calls it the intelligence that moves everything. You could call it God. You could call it Shakti if you're in the Hindu tradition, Brahman in Hinduism, Allah, Elohim, Avun. Jesus called it Avun, one of the words he used for that. Uh, Buddha nature, the Great Spirit. Various American indigenous people used that term in whatever their tribal religion was. Uh, you know, so there's just one of them, the spirit. Although it has three kind of little manifestations if you're getting into the Trinity thing, but there's one spirit, but there's multiple souls. They're all unique. My wife just walked in from walking Greta, so that's two more souls came in here. So it's a uniqueness, and small, large, they're different. Are they separate? That dissolves one of the main problems we have in this world, where we confuse difference with separateness. No, they're all ocean all the time. Even when the wave goes up onto the beach and falls apart and then is no more, and hasn't left the one ocean, you see. That's a beautiful thought to have, especially as you get older and you see other waves that you know ahead of you, maybe a little older. Sometimes newer waves, all of a sudden they disappear. They lose their form. Still connected all the time. Never disconnected. But waves come and go on one level of perception, all ocean all the time. So that's a nice way to at least get the difference between soul and spirit. And then there's practice we want to bring into, but there's only 5 options you have of dealing with this. And if you showed up here, we could have atheists or materialists here. They'd probably be in the, and you'd be welcome. But atheists, atheist, a means not. So somebody who does not believe in anything on the spiritual realm. And that's fine. That would be, we're in an age of really materialism. Somebody said there's no ghost in this machine. Yeah, because they used to call the spirit the Holy Ghost, there's no ghost in this machine. There's just this machine, and there's nothing after. Well, all right, that's a view. That's one view. And then there's the second possible way of relating to this. All of this mystery is a polytheism. They believe in a lot of gods. Okay, and then there's monotheism that came in the Middle East with Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. They believe there's one God, mono. Okay, so you got, in between, we probably have more than a few agnostics here. People said, I don't know, because Gnostic means to know, and so agnostic means I don't know. I don't know. Is there? What's God like? There's a lot of doubt in there, and they're just saying maybe there is a God, maybe there isn't. Well, I'm sure we have a few, because that's actually a lot of people would probably, if they really thought about the choices, they'd probably say, well, I don't know. So there is no spirit. I don't know about the spirit. There's many spirits. There's only one spirit. And then the mystic, and the guy singing the song there, Bruce Coburn's a mystic poet. The mystic believed there's only God. Not just one, it just believes it's just sort of that picture, we're all manifestations of the divine. Sometimes those people are called not pantheists, but panentheists, which means God is in everything and everything's in God. But there are these manifestations. This computer, my cell phone, dust bunnies. My first teacher, Suzuki Roshi, said you must be prepared to bow to everything, including dust bunnies. And I would tell my wife, including squirrels, because squirrels are raiding her her bird feeder. She got a bird feeder for Mother's Day that has a little camera in it. So when the indigo buntings come in there, she saw one the other day, then it takes a picture of them. And then, but it also has a little siren on it, like a police siren. So when the squirrel gets up there, you can hit the police siren button, and the squirrel jumps off the first time. The second time he comes back, he just sits there munching away. So we're trying to work with other technologies, but yeah. So you really, when it comes down to it, there's only 5 possible ways of relating to spirit, and this is quite fluid because you move through these things. No one's better than the other. Atheists, materialist brothers and sisters, you're welcome, or anybody else, polytheists, monotheists, mystics. That's why I call it. Bruce's song at the beginning was called "The Festival of Friends." You're all welcome. Everybody's included. Everybody belongs. That was the original meaning of Catholic. Somewhere it got lost along the way. Okay, so now here's a poem which you may have heard before. It's beautiful. This is a poem actually to have in your heart. It's one you could really put in. I first met this poem when my mother had died, and then 4 years later, my father was on his in the last stages of the dying process, and had taken to a bed, which was going to be a nightmare. It didn't last long. My mother died millimeter by millimeter for 4 years. My father, less than a week after he took to the bed, the difference between a 5 and an 8 on the Enneagram. We hadn't even signed all the papers for hospice, and he was out of there. And I'll talk about that some other time. Somebody recently said, well, what were your parents' belief systems? Well, my mother was certainly a fervent reader of the Bible and very quiet about it. She didn't push it on here. My father would know a Bible if he saw one. And they had very different deaths, but both okay. Well, anyway, this poem, I discovered it when Dad was dying, and it had a big impact on me. I heard David White recite it one time, and it just hit me right away. And it gives you the vocabulary of spirit, soul, and practice all in one poem. These are the guys, poets, mystics. They know the language of soul, and Jungian therapists. I work with a great 80-some-year-old Jungian therapist in St. Louis. She's brilliant, and because psychology really means in Greek the study of the soul. Yeah, but psychology moved on because you couldn't get any funding for soul. So you get funding for data, But the Jungians never forgot that. And Joseph Campbell, great myth guy, mythologist, they understand soul. The stories are all about spirit, soul, and practice. Well, here's the poem. The wind, one brilliant day, called to my soul with the fragrance of jasmine. The wind said, in return for the fragrance of my jasmine, I'd like the fragrance of your roses. My soul replied, I have no roses. All the flowers in my garden are dead. Well then, said the wind, I'll take the withered petals and the yellow leaves and all the waters of the fountain. And with them, the wind left, and I wept. And I said to myself, what have you done with the garden that was entrusted to you? This is a poem by Antonio Machado. He was locked up by Franco during the Spanish Civil War. Like Franco read Plato and read the Republic, and so he put all the artists in jail. And Franco actually wrote this, or Machado wrote this poem in a jail and smuggled it out to buoy the people up, you know. And so the wind is a symbol always for the spirit. You never know. Wind comes and goes, and that was certainly the St. Paul's idea of the spirit comes and goes, and it's hard. You can't catch it. You could get a box and put it in the wind, put the lid on it. You wouldn't have the wind. So that's why you cannot define it. If you try to define it, then you don't have the spirit, you see. Think about catching the wind in a box. It's not the wind anymore. See, so the wind was the spirit, uncatchable, mysterious, comes and goes. And then the wind one brilliant day called to my soul with the fragrance of jasmine. The wind said, in return for the fragrance of my jasmine, I'd like the fragrance of your roses. My soul replied, I have no roses. All the flowers in my garden are dead. Well then, said the wind, I'll take the withered petals and the yellow leaves and all the water of the fountain. And with them, the wind left. And I wept. And I said to myself, what have you done with the garden that was entrusted to you? Yeah. Amazing poem. One you can learn and keep it in your heart. That's one I have in my heart. Don't need anything don't need the text up there to read it. What have you done with the garden that was entrusted to you? Now, garden is also another great symbol because, you know, in the Middle East especially, but we have it in the beginning of the Old Testament in Genesis because these were Middle Eastern people and it was pretty dry there and water was incredibly important, and to have a garden was a kind of symbol of heaven, of just the best it can get. What have you done with the garden that was entrusted to you? So, yeah, fragrance that comes in here. Jasmine is unlike the rose. We had the jasmine and the rose. In return for the fragrance of my jasmine, I'd like the fragrance of your roses. Those are two very interesting images. If you could picture jasmine, which is really cultivated, probably the most where it is in the Asian, in the sub-Indian continent, but it comes from the Middle East too, and it's a viney kind of thing. So there's a lot of petals, and it's can drape over walls of the garden, et cetera, and it's cultivated for its fragrance. Now roses are very different, but they're the same in that if you actually raise roses and you raise roses, they will have a great fragrance. The ones you get at Kroger, they're coming from Peru or wherever they're coming from, and they've been frozen and all that stuff, and there's usually no fragrance. See, but the fragrance is what, and so the spirit is saying, and the spirit is more like jasmine because it just spreads out, and there's no beginning or end where individual rose. Put one rose, give somebody a rose, or you put a rose on a coffin at the end of their life. Though people throw their individual roses. It's much more of an individual plant. But if you raise flowers, roses take a lot of care. They're not like other flowers, and if you don't really take care of them, they won't thrive. And that takes us back to last Saturday, if you were here, and which is when we were talking about flourishing. I showed you a picture at the beginning, if you came in and were able to see it, of my wife's garden outside of Loose Leaf Hollow. It just flourishes, and all these things are all over the place. It's just brilliant. It's the first thing people see when they come, even if they haven't met me. They see this unbelievable flourishing garden, and she's the first to greet people, and then it says, "Welcome, friends." And that's a relationship right there, flourishing and welcome. The Sufi Hafez says, "You've been invited to meet a friend." The friend would be the Sufi word for the one. You've been invited to meet the friend. It's an invitation. Yeah. So that gives you a sense of it. And then, when you said, I have no flowers, all the flowers, I have no roses, all the flowers in my garden are dead, that's what we call burnout. Although the poets and people understand soul, because soul isn't a material thing. It is not like an oven or like a light bulb. All our Jesus had the Sufis used no mechanical imagery to talk about this because we're organic. There's something, and especially the soul is not material substance. It's an energy. It's the energy of flourishing, like you saw in the garden. Uh, on last Saturday, I talked about the energy of that will actually kill all the flowers in the garden, the pain body, the dysfunctional ego. So these are two energy systems in us. And they sort of do balance each other out. You don't want to fight anything. But if as more as you do the soul practice, uh, just so the garden that you saw there is beautiful because my wife goes out on 90-degree days and weeds. That's the reason the flourishing happens. Weeds will choke out the roses. It's like we used to live. We have to drive back past the paint place, and it'd say Russ never sleeps, and they had all this paint covering the globe. Well, they don't use that anymore because it's too accurate. But weeds never sleep. Nothing wrong with weeds. I used to tell my wife, I said, why don't we just cultivate weeds? It's a lot easier. She says, you don't understand anything. I was just pulling her leg, but weeds never sleep. That's why, a daily practice. Yeah. The interesting thing there is it's sort of a bleak poem, and I actually taught that poem to junior high kids for a couple of years before a girl, because I said, well, this is really a cautionary poem. It's sort of dark, but I think we need this bitter medicine sometimes, especially in junior high. You don't spend 60 years, without understanding what keeps you alive. And the one seventh grade girl just said, well, it's not a totally negative poem. It's just not a totally cautionary. And I said, well, how can you see anything hope? And he said, yeah. And I wept, because I said, they took all the water from the garden. And so if no water, no garden. And she said, well, then he wept. That tear could bring back the garden. So grieving things that are lost, grieving your mistakes. Yeah, we all make them. We're not perfect. Even practice isn't perfect. Somebody once said, practice, how did they say it? Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice is perfect. So if you have a practice, sitting, we're going to sit in a minute. Maybe if after a while, after the whole thing, your ego says, well, that was a waste of time. Who hasn't heard that? If you have a sitting practice, well, that was bullshit. That was a waste of time. You should have been, doing something else. Well, that's the ego's point of view, or sometimes the pain body point of view, the dysfunctional ego. The point is practice doesn't make perfect. Practice is perfect. And so when we sit for this 20 minutes, and maybe you'll take the option to write, if you want to write the last 5 minutes and into the next thing, that's great. Because sometimes you do have a flourishing sit, and things are like bursting to be said. Well, then you can do the writing. Okay, so I think that's enough to at least give us the vocabulary of spirit and the soul, and what it means to feel dead. We don't burn out, and it can always be brought back. Even asking that question, what have I done with the garden that was entrusted to me? Soul garden. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's enough for the talk.